get really good references. So one of my reference letters was from the attorney I work for, and he wrote a pretty great letter. And again, like on multiple occasions, they brought up his letter that he had written. So I think those two really helped me stand out during the admissions process.
Thank you. So our third question is, we know of your early involvement in law. Do you mind letting us know who inspired you, or if there was any event that inspired you to pursue this career?
So I wouldn't say there was like one person or one defining moment, but to be quite honest, the way I got roped in and just super, super into it was I was a freshman in high school, and my friend had invited me to like a mock trial practice. And I mean, I didn't really know much about anything. And I mean, I was a freshman in high school, so I was just trying to join, whatever clubs, organizations I could. And we had our first practice at the state courthouse here, and I loved it. I mean, I feel like from that moment forward, it just created like this snowball effect to where I just wanted to get as involved and, get as immersed as I could in the legal field to make sure that I really wanted to be a lawyer, because I mean, it's just as exciting as, I'm not sure if any of you guys have participated in mock trial, but the excitement you get, right? Like being in mock trial and opening statements, cross-examination, like it exists in the real world, and being able to do that in the real world later on in my life at the firm, just really, really motivated me to keep pursuing this.
Thank you. So our fourth question is, what do you think can make us more attractive, a more attractive candidate when applying to college or law school?
I think the most important thing that could help you guys is just answering like the big question, which is like, why law, right? I think if you guys can answer that question as early as possible with a good reason, right? Because a lot of people, and I've seen this just working at the firm I do, I've seen a lot of attorneys come and go, and so many of them go into it for the wrong reasons. They go into it because they didn't know what to do after undergrad, or their parents were lawyers, or maybe they saw a TV show they liked and they thought that was what it was going to be like. So making sure you answer that question as early as you can, and make it a question that, or an answer that really motivates you, right? You're going into law because you want to, help immigrants, or you want to help fix the criminal justice system, whatever your motivating factor is. If you can determine that early on, it truly does resonate in your applications, like in your personal statements, in interviews, that resonates, right? If you can answer that question with purpose and with, actual motivation, I think that's going to help you guys stand out. And also in the college admissions process, I think if you guys, have a good story to tell and have a good message to portray, right? I think that is what helps you stand out more than anything you can put on a resume.
Thank you for the advice. So our next question is, how did you prepare for the LSAT, and are there any programs that you would recommend?
Yeah, so I prepared for the LSAT in like staggered ways. So the first time I started preparing, it was a little difficult because I was working full-time, going to grad school full-time. And so it was very, very hard for me to find time to study. I was doing a lot of self-studying at that point with, I used Khan Academy. And so Khan Academy, what's really good about that is that it's free, and you don't have to pay anything, and they give you access to, to tests, to practice questions. And so that was a good way to start, I think. When I really, really got into it, which was a year later after I took the LSAT the first time, a year later, after I had graduated from grad school, I decided to work on it a little bit more. And at that point, I did start using other outside materials. They aren't free, but they are investments, I think, that you should consider. First of all, I used PowerScore. I did do a live course through them. It was virtual, but it was a live course nonetheless. And so that helped, start getting strategy, right? Because it's the LSAT at the end of the day, it does not test, your actual ability to be a lawyer or your actual ability, your actual, comprehension of certain things. All it really does is test how well you know how to take the test. And that's the same thing for the SAT, the ACT, right? It only tests how well you've been trained to take the test. And so by using, these courses, they're experts in learning how to take the test, right? Some of these people have like perfected a method to get 180s. And so it's more so strategy that they teach you. And that course helped me a lot. And then at that point, I did self-studying after the course had finished. And I used PowerScore again, but I used just for logic games. They have what are called Bibles. And so I used the Logic Games Bible for that one. And that helped a ton. Like the Logic Games Bible helped me, I think, the most than any material I had used. And then for logical reasoning, I did two things. So in undergrad, my minor was in philosophy, and I did take an intro to logic course that kind of gets you familiar with how basic logic functions, at least in philosophy. And those same principles of logic and philosophy are applied in logical reasoning. And logic games too, to a certain extent, but logic games is more about following rules than it is memorizing like logical fallacies and things of that nature. So for logical reasoning, I used a book called The Loophole. I believe the author's name's Ellen Cassidy. And that taught me logical reasoning in a different way than PowerScore had. It approached it more so the way I had learned logic in philosophy. And so that also helped a lot. For reading comp, really reading comp, what I think helped me a lot was in grad school, all we did was read articles, right? Like political science articles that are data-driven articles. And so what that teaches you how to do is break down the article, right? It helps you figure out, the key points, the hypothesis, the methods, the conclusion. So I think being conditioned through grad school to read an article and pull out the key points helped me more than anything, because to be honest, there really isn't too much of a strategy for reading comp. You can kind of get one, but really the best way to improve in reading comprehension is to, one, just read more, like just read as much as you can in terms of books. I had a friend of mine who used to read a book and then summarize it in a page right after they were done to help them, see if they can identify key points. But to be honest, I think that's a benefit of political science is it's data-driven learning in terms of research. And so that conditioning, I think, helped me a lot improve in reading comp. But besides that, I think my most general advice is uh, start early enough to where you give yourself enough space to learn and develop strategy, but don't start so early that you burn yourself out, because this test is really, really mentally draining and exhausting, and the whole process does take a toll on you. But I would, if you're planning on going straight from undergrad to law school, I'd probably recommend, maybe at the beginning of your junior year in undergrad, start studying kind of. Then the summer between junior and senior year, really hammer it in, and then maybe take like a fall exam for the LSAT. But that's my most general advice, is just try not to burn yourself out, because it is a lot about like stamina and energy that you put into the test that determines how well you do.
Thank you for the advice.
Mhm.
So our following question is, do you think that getting involved with the community will help you applying to college or law school?
Yeah, definitely. It helps a lot, because a lot of law schools, and I think generally lawyers, bar associations, they like seeing community service, because when you think of a lawyer generally, right, you think of them as officers of the court, officers, and generally the judicial system is designed to help the most disadvantaged. Now, whether they do that or not, that's arguable, but it's designed and conceptually supposed to be a protector of, those most in need. And so by engaging in community service, you indicate to law schools and to your future employers, and to when you're applying to the bar, um, you're showing to them that you're going to go beyond just your job, right? You're not going to do like an 8 to 5 clock out and then call it a day, so a lot of um, actually most states, Texas does, and New Mexico too, but a lot of states require you to do pro bono hours once you're an attorney. So you have to complete a certain number of pro bono service every year to continue to be licensed in that state. So it's, I think, a fundamental portion of what being a lawyer is. And so if you can establish early on that you are dedicated to community service, I think it'll definitely help you a whole lot. And it also help you personally get some grounding as to what your actual purpose is and what your purpose is going to be as a lawyer.
Thank you. That is great to know. So our following question is, approximately how long was the law school process? And was there any obstacles along the way that you had to pass?
Mm-hmm. So if we were to count the first time I took the LSAT, it would be about a year and a half. But really the whole law school application process in terms of applying, well, taking the LSAT the second time and then applying, it was about a year in total. And I did reach a lot of obstacles. And the main reason I think, and I'm not sure if many of you here are seniors, but I understand that the college admissions process was also heavily impacted by COVID. Really, any admissions process was heavily impacted by COVID. And the main reason was that, at least in the law school side, you had a hyper influx of people applying to law school that just completely threw off a balance, right? And it's for a lot of reasons, right? We had people who graduated from undergrad and did not have jobs lined up because of the pandemic. A lot of people just didn't know what to do next. We had a lot of good social movements that came out of 2020, and that also motivated people to go to law school. And so that, coupled with the fact that the LSAT was converted to an at-home test, and it removed a section, so the test was shorter. And so obviously people who had like test fatigue or test anxiety were a little calmer. And what happened is there was then inflation of high LSAT scores because of that. And so you have a lot of people with high LSAT scores, a lot of people applying. And so essentially law schools had to make a lot of choices in terms of who to admit and who to waitlist and reject. And so I think my obstacle was that I applied during a year that obviously there was a lot of competition. Granted, I think it's good that a lot of people are applying to law school. I think this, we always, our country and our communities need lawyers. But that was one obstacle I think I faced. I got waitlisted at 9 schools. And so it was, it was tough, I think, getting a lot of waitlist at schools that I had originally thought would be like a target school. But I think what that taught me is that really anything, whether you're applying for a job or for law school or college, right? Everything's completely out of your hands. Like you can have the perfect GPA, the perfect LSAT, and at the end of the day, if it's one person's decision whether they get to admit you or not, and that has nothing to do with the value of your application or the value of your intent to go to law school. But I think this process helped me kind of solidify that message to myself. And but yeah, definitely, if there's some high school seniors in here, I'm sure the same thing happened with the college admissions process. Just the fact that a lot of universities had to make tough choices, and people were just put in really tough binds. But overall, I'm really content with how everything turned out, and I'm pretty excited, to start in the fall.
Yes, thank you. So now we'll pass it on to the Vice President, Marco Risoli. He will have some questions as well.
All right.
Yes, thank you for having me here, and thank you for coming to this meeting.
Yeah, of course.
I have some questions that I want to ask you. And for the first question, how has COVID-19 affected the learning process? And do you think it's harder to learn?
The learning process?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. I think it's definitely harder to, because, okay, in general, we have what has been coined, right, pandemic fatigue, to where you're just operating at a higher level of general stress and anxiety given your environment. And so as it is, you're operating on probably like 50% energy and general motivation that you would have. And coupled with that, right, you, for instance, in my situation, uh, I had to work from home for a very long period of time when the pandemic started. And working from home was very difficult because, one, right, I live with my parents and my brother, and everyone's in one house, right? And everyone's stuck in the same house, and everyone has obligations. And so to be able to concentrate on just yourself and what you need to do becomes more difficult in that situation. Plus, the fact that you're learning through a screen makes it definitely much harder. And at least on my end, while work never depleted, right? We were lucky enough that we just continue getting work, and new lawsuits and new cases were coming in because people were tight on money, and people were just, there was a lot of general uncertainty. A lot of our clients became much more demanding. And so what ended up happening is, instead of working your normal like 8 hours, we were working like 10, 12 hours a day to meet what our clients needed. And so for me, what that translated to was, I had been already working 10, 12 hours a day, and to then sit down and read a book, right, and try to self-study and absorb information about really abstract concepts, because the LSAT's not going to be testing you on, like, it's not like you are reading, I don't know, like studying for like a history exam, like a US history exam. You can make flashcards and start memorizing material and just spew it out for a test. This is truly a very abstract type test where you're learning concepts that are sometimes difficult to absorb and to conceptualize. And so doing that on very, very low energy is definitely difficult. And I'm sure for you guys as well. Luckily I had graduated just around the beginning of the pandemic, and so I didn't have to actually do class through Zoom. But I mean, my brother has been doing class through Zoom, and it's difficult, right? And I'm sure you guys know just as well how difficult it is to do that when you are in an environment, when you're in a bedroom or like in a room in your house. It's not an engaging environment where you can, actively learn. So yeah, no, definitely COVID has affected that. And I'm hoping later in the future, right, colleges and law schools, when you guys apply to law school or when you guys are applying to colleges, they obviously, hopefully, will be sensitive to that issue, right? To the fact that a lot of people struggled a lot more to learn and do just as well as they would have had, they've been in class during like non-pandemic times.
Yeah, I totally understand. Since we're also going virtually as well, so I understand the struggle.
Mm-hmm.
For our second question is that you mentioned that you shouldn't start studying for the LSAT very early. Around how many months prior do you think that you should start studying for the LSAT?
So let's say you're going to apply X year. I don't know. Let's say like 2024, right? You want to apply fall of 2024. That's when you want to submit your applications. So you probably want to take a summer LSAT, like a June LSAT or a spring LSAT. And so whenever you calculate that date, right, whichever LSAT date you'd want, and sometimes they release LSAT dates like a year in advance, so you know which dates are going to be available for you. I would then probably just dedicate a year, like probably 6 months of getting your feet wet, and then 6 months of like intense studying, and then that's it. Because truly, if you go beyond that and you can learn things in other means. Like what I mean by that is, you can, like, if you guys, once you guys are in college, I would honestly recommend taking a logic class, like some philosophy intro to logic course. That's going to help you, right? And granted, it's not going to be an LSAT course per se, but the fact that you know how logic operates at that level, which is exactly how it's translated in the LSAT, but the LSAT puts it into different abstract concepts, that's going to help you, right? Also, just refining your reading skills, reading articles, specifically like data-driven articles. And you can do that through a lot of social sciences, psychology, sociology, political science, all of those disciplines and research. And so that's another way to refine your skills. So you can work towards the LSAT in different ways, but in terms of like you guys sitting down right now and buying an LSAT book and working on it, I wouldn't recommend it, just because you're going to burn yourself out so early that by the time it comes along, you have to take the test, you're going to be burnt out mentally from it. So That's my recommendation.
Okay, thank you for your advice. For our third question is that earlier you mentioned about participating in the community. What were some ways that you participated in the community?
Yes. So the most recent thing I've participated in. So first of all, UTEP. When I was an undergrad, UTEP has what is called Project Move, and so Project Move gets organizations on campus and puts down to the community for a day of service. And I did Project Move every year that I was in undergrad at UTEP. And we got to do stuff like we built a park one year for a neighborhood in San Elizario. Another time we put smoke detectors in houses in the lower valley. And then my last year of undergrad, we painted horse stables at this horse air. Like it was basically like a farm, I guess, that dedicated its services to therapy. So they used like horses for therapeutical means. And so we cleaned the stables and like painted the stables and stuff. But that was through UTEP. After that, at Rincon Law Group, I was part of a committee that we designed yearly service days. And so what we did is we started volunteering with the Center Against Sexual and Family Violence here in El Paso. And every year we would coordinate with the firm for all of us to go out on one day. One would coordinate a donation to their food pantry, and then two, we would help them clean and make lunch for them, make dinner. And so those were some ways that I did it. In high school, what I did a lot was, I think it was through NHS. I mean, NHS, I think was the easiest way to get community service in. I used to volunteer with a center called the Center for International Visitors. I believe that's what it was called. And essentially what we would do was welcome people from other countries who were coming in to either do research or to come just visit. It was like a tourist liaison type organization. And so I helped a lot there at retirement homes. There's so much to do just here in El Paso to help the community. And I mean, yeah, so that's some things I did, but obviously like at different levels, there's going to be a lot of different opportunities for y'all to get out there.
Very interesting. Thank you. For our fourth question is, besides UTEP and the University of Iowa College of Law, what other law schools did you have in mind when applying?
So I had a lot in mind. So here's my thing. I never, when I was applying, I never had like a dream school. And I think that was important for me because going into this process, I didn't want to attach myself to a school because I think that that sets you up for disappointment if you don't get in, right? And so my thing was like, okay, I'm not applying to law school to go to X school, right? I'm applying to law school because I want to be a lawyer. So what I decided to do was just throw out a huge fish net and like see what would stick. So I was like constantly emailing admissions offices trying to get fee waivers. And they give fee waivers out like candy, to be honest. Like you just gotta email them or you go to like fairs. Because of COVID, they had a lot of virtual fairs and I would attend the virtual fairs. You just sign in and that next day I would get emailed all these fee waivers. So I applied to 20 schools because of that. And that helped me a lot because I got to see kind of like what was going on. Granted, at the beginning of the process, I did have like target schools, reach schools. I kind of categorize them like that, right? You don't want to apply to just like the top 14 schools because you don't know what's going to happen. You know, you always want to have like reach schools, target schools, and then safety schools. Excuse me. And so that's what I did. And so I didn't really have a school in mind. But I mean, I did apply to some of the top schools, and obviously like when you apply to top schools, that's pretty cool, right? Because these are schools that you hear about like in movies or you just know are generally very good schools. And so just being able to, you know, either interview or I got waitlisted at some, like just being able to at least kind of get your feet in there was very cool. But I never had like a dream school. So I didn't really have like my eyes on one school or not even a region for that matter. So.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it makes sense that you don't want to get attached to a school that will disappoint you at the very end if you don't get
Right.
accepted. And then talking about fee waivers, Is there a fee waiver for the LSAT?
Yes, there is. So that process was a little more difficult because so it's through what's called LSAC. I'm sure you guys have already heard of it, the Law School Admissions Council. They govern everything regarding law school admissions. It's kind of like the College Board, but for law school admissions. And so, but it goes beyond that actually, because College Board just governs what SAT, right? And so this not only governs the LSAT, but governs everything related to admissions. So you have to apply for a fee waiver through them. And it is difficult sometimes because they have, I don't even know what the cutoff point is, but they had, I think they have like a very, very, very low cutoff point for the income level. I ended up appealing it, and it took like months for them to get back to me. And by that time, I'd already taken the LSAT. So just there, it is available to you, but if you're gonna, I would plan ahead in terms of the fee waiver because you have to apply for it. It's not just given to you automatically. And so if you're going to go through like an appeals process, it's going to take a couple months. So you can either plan for that or you can save up for the test, which is, I believe it's $200 for the exam.
Okay. Well, thank you for your advice. I will now give it back to our president, Emiliano Mares.
Okay, thank you. So we're done with the questions. So do you want to share your screen, Jonathan, or?
Yeah, let me, I'm going to share the PowerPoint. I'm not sure what we've already gone over that's in the PowerPoint, but if I repeat myself, well, I'll try to skip over that stuff. It's a short PowerPoint. So we're good. Can you guys see everything fine?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm just gonna go through a little bit of background. We've already talked about some stuff, but I just wanted, since you guys are in high school, I guess I don't usually talk about what I did in high school because I think people just kind of forget about it after you graduate. But since you guys are in high school, I did want to kind of mention what I did in high school that I think helped me in the long run, because it did help me gain some footing to where I'm at now. So I went to Franklin High School. I graduated in 2015. Throughout Franklin, my time at Franklin, I did three main things that I think helped me a lot. Obviously, mock trial. I talked about how that was kind of how I got involved into wanting to be a lawyer. And I did mock trial all 4 years of high school. And that was awesome. I mean, that was one of my most memorable experiences. I made a lot of good friends there that I'm still friends with to this day. And some of them are in law school. One of them is already a lawyer, actually. And so, you make good connections there. I did speech and debate as well. Speech and debate. I mean, I think that just all it did was really just help me become a better speaker, which if you're going to go into law and you want to be a litigator specifically, that might be a little bit more important. But and then I did moot court through UTEP's LSPI program when I was in high school. So, and then, yeah, I went to UTEP right after high school. Like I said, I got my concentration in law, helped me take really informative and immersive courses to kind of get my feet wet, and then that minor in philosophy. And so I think you made me host. Did you, Emiliano?
Yes, I did.
Okay, because there's someone in the waiting room, so I'm just gonna let them in. Anyway, sorry. So I graduated from UTEP and then got my master's in political science. And the master's program I was in was very research focused. So I did multiple research projects throughout my time in graduate school. My mentor, her PhD was in public law. And so she was essentially a lawyer. She just didn't have a law license and didn't have a JD. But I mean, all she did was law related research and publications. And so I worked on a lot of research related to federal courts and specifically judicial behavior. Is basically just analyzing what causes judges to vote in certain ways. And that's a very popular research topic that a lot of lawyers are into as well, because a lot of your practice boils down to what a judge rules. Doesn't matter how good your motion is, right? If the judge doesn't rule in your favor, then you're kind of screwed. So that was really, really interesting getting to just research all of that. And so I graduated from there in May of 2020, and I've been taking a gap year between law school and my time at UTEP. And then, as Emiliano mentioned, I work as a paralegal at Rincon Law Group. And so that, I think, I'll get into that later. I think I talk about it a little bit later, but just wanted to bring that up. We talked about, right, like why law. You want to answer that question as best as you can to help you convey a good message and communicate your story in a way that's impactful and convincing to law school admissions councils. You want to try to gain as much exposure as you can before you go in. That's my recommendation. That was my goal right out of high school, was to try to get as much exposure as I could. And I did that through research. I didn't really do an internship that's law related. The only internship I did, I worked at City Hall. It's not law related, but you can do, a lot of my friends have done internships with the county, with nonprofits here like Las Americas, Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid. So there's a lot of options available to you. And then also I'm a huge proponent of this. Some people may not be, but I'm a very big proponent of having gap years. I think it helps a lot having time between when you finish undergrad to, one, collect yourself in a way that prepares you mentally to then go to law school. And also it gives you a chance to enter the workforce for a little bit. So for me, when I graduated from undergrad, I decided instead to pursue a master's degree, but being able to do a master's degree allowed me to take classes in the evening. So basically I was able to work full time, which gave me a lot of good experience working at that law firm, because you get to see, right, what the practice is every day. It's more hands-on experience versus, taking a class. I think I learned way more than I did in my undergrad than I did at the firm. So like at the firm really, really helped me out a lot. So I'm a huge proponent of that. If you guys can take a year, if that's something that you have the resources to do, I would highly recommend it. We talked a lot about the LSAT, right? Like not studying so early that you get burnt out. And then the fact that the LSAT does not actually measure anything, any actual cognitive capability. Talked about what I did for the LSAT. The only thing that's on here, let me see. Oh, the 7Sage. I didn't talk about that. 7Sage is a service, LSAT preparation service, that also has LSAT prep courses. Like you can take their course. It's very broken down in terms of like it's almost like a module type learning where you complete modules, where you watch videos, do practice. I use 7Sage solely to have diagnostic tests to work with. So I would take a weekly diagnostic test to see where I was at, and I used 7Sage to gain access to those tests. That had a really good measurement in terms of how, what sections I need to work on and stuff like that.
So sorry, I had a question. So is 7Sage like it's like the LSAT but a small version, or is it the same but it's like a practice one?
Oh, it's like they're copies of previous LSATs. So they're like actual versions of previous LSATs, which I thought were very helpful. And versus, for instance, I think Khan Academy doesn't do full versions. I think it just takes questions from random tests and generates them into modules for you, versus 7Sage allows you to take a full test, timed, and exactly in the order that it was presented on an LSAT, and including the experimental section, which that helped me a lot. Just taking a weekly diagnostic test, that's something I would recommend a lot too, is, obviously do practice questions, work through what you are not doing as well at, and then just take a weekly diagnostic test to make sure that what you did was good enough to improve where you needed to. The law school admissions process, we talked a lot about. I applied to 20 schools. I got 9 wait lists, 3 acceptances, and then I got 8 rejections. And then we talked about COVID's effect on that. Something else too, university budgets. That's something else that not a lot of people talk about. But the scholarships, right, were kind of hard to come around this year, just because schools are now dealing with people dropping out of school. And so a lot of us, like for instance, at the University of Iowa, about 15 of us are on a scholarship wait list. So we haven't even been told what our actual financial aid package looks like. Uh, I got admitted to University of Washington in Seattle, and they just flat out gave nothing, uh, no money. And then I got into the University of Wisconsin, and they paid for half. They offered half scholarship, but even with half scholarship at Wisconsin, it's still cheaper to go to Iowa. And Iowa was a better school. So that was kind of my reasoning with it. It was a lot to do with like the financial situation, but again, just going back to what COVID has done to the admissions process, and I know it's going to also affect to a certain extent the college admissions process. So that was another thing. And then I also want to just talk about, I guess, how I chose a law school. For me, granted, law school ranks matter to a certain extent, right? It's not, if you're between ranked 25 and 26, it doesn't matter, right? But if you're like between like 26 and like 4, right? Okay, then yeah, it does matter. The rankings do matter to a certain extent. The biggest thing that was important for me, law schools have to publish, in order, it's required by the American Bar Association for them to publish what are called 509 reports. And so if you look up the 509 report for law school, I'm not sure if you all are familiar with them, but they essentially summarize everything for that law school in terms of the admissions process. So it'll say what, all their LSAT, GPA medians, how many people applied, stuff like that. But the 509 report also includes employment prospects. And so it'll summarize for each graduating class how many people graduated, how many people got jobs at certain sectors. So like federal clerkships, public sector, with the type of firm that they work at, and then the geographical area where they go. So for me, the employment side was the most important for me because personally, I don't have a regional attachment. Well, besides El Paso, obviously, but I don't have like a market that I'm determined to work in. So when it came to, for instance, University of Washington in Seattle, you look at their employment report and it'll say like 88% of graduates work or end up working in the Pacific Northwest, right? And so to me, right, I was like, okay, that's not enough geographic diversity for me to want to go there because, you're basically having to almost make a decision where your career might end up, right, before you even go to law school. And same thing with Wisconsin. Wisconsin was very almost, exclusively in the Midwest, specifically Wisconsin. And Iowa had the most geographic diversity. So they placed a lot of people in Texas, a lot of people in the Midwest, but more so like the Chicago area, New York, Washington, like all over the country. And so to me, that was very important because I needed that option because I don't want to commit myself early to something that I may not, I may regret later or may have to work harder than I should to get out of that, right? And then obviously it came down to the financial side. Even if I was to take out a full set of loans to go to the University of Iowa, it was going to be the cheapest option out of all the schools. And that was very important for me. Granted, like I said, I'm still on this wait list, so I'm not even sure what that's going to look like. But at the end of the day, it was still going to be cheaper. And it was the highest ranked school out of the ones that I got into. So that everything coupled together was the main reason I chose the University of Iowa. Now, if you do have a regional attachment, like you guys know, like maybe you're an undergrad, you do an internship in like DC or New York, and you want to work there, like that is where you want to be, then you want to look for schools that place in those markets. Granted, the top schools, like probably like top 10 schools, they can place anywhere, right? Like it's very easy for you to get a job anywhere. But if you're starting to look at lower ranked schools outside of the top 10, then you have to start really looking at those reports to see where they place and if it's a market that you're going to want to end up actually working in. So yeah, that's how I went about choosing the University of Iowa. And that's all I had, really. I mean, I'm not sure what else, any other questions you guys may have had. I didn't really want to like overwhelm y'all with too much information, but I think your questions were very guiding. So I think we were able to cover a lot.
Thank you for explaining all of that, Jonathan.
Yeah, of course. Do you guys still have any questions? I mean, I know I went over a couple more things.
From Miguel. What is your
Right.
mindset going into law school?
Oh, like my mindset. Okay. Well, I guess my mindset, if I was to generalize it, is just I'm going in with the understanding that although I have prepared myself for this moment, right? Like I have done everything to make sure that law is what I want to do. Um, and I've taken these courses and I've worked at a law firm and I've crossed all my T's and dotted all the I's, right? I'm going in with the mindset that I truly don't know anything. Like at the end of the day, I'm clueless. I think that's the best way to enter something because that allows you to open your mind to a clean slate and absorb information the way you should. Because, but with enough confidence, knowing that that's where you belong, right? I think that's the most important thing. You don't want to go into something uh, thinking you know everything or thinking you know more than or you've experienced more than other people. I think you should always approach things truly thinking you know nothing, and that's the best way to learn. But you prepare yourself enough so you go in confident enough, knowing that you belong in that area and you earned your spot just as well as anyone else did. And so that's kind of the mindset I'm going in with.
Thank you. That's such a great mindset.
Thanks.
So does anybody have any other questions? You can put them in chat or you can unmute your mic. So this concludes.
I have a question. Do you think it's better to stay like when you go to the college? Do you think it's better to stay on the dorms inside the campus or outside the campus?
Okay, so with my situation, it's a little bit different because I went to UTEP. And so, granted, UTEP does have dorms, right? Like you can stay at a dorm at UTEP. But one of the main reasons I chose UTEP um, was because I knew I wanted to go to law school, right? Like I I was torn between like two schools, UTEP and a school in New York. And in New York, obviously, like it's expensive to live there. And I was going to be able to go to UTEP for free, right? So I was like, okay, uh, I know I want to go to law school. I'm not going to take out debt, right? I'm not going to take out loans just to go to New York, knowing I want to go to law school, right? So I chose UTEP. Now UTEP is a commuter campus, so people live in the dorms, but I never lived in the dorms at UTEP. The main reason was because while my tuition was covered at UTEP, if I wanted to live in the dorms, it would have costed me money to live there. Granted, I all my friends who lived in the dorms, they really liked it. I mean, they really liked living at UTEP. A lot of my friends who went to other colleges, they all loved living in the dorms. Uh, I think that's where they made like a lot of close friends. A lot of my friends, what they did is they like lived their first year in the dorms, and then they moved out the second year and got an apartment with some friends, right? I had some friends who lived in the dorms like all 4 years. I know one of my friends actually, uh, they became an RA. So they lived in the dorms. Their first year became an RA, a resident assistant, and then they got to live in the dorms for free the remaining 3 years of undergrad. So I, if I would have gone to college outside of El Paso, I would have wanted to live in the dorms. I think I think that's part of the experience, is to get to know people through there, because you're almost forcefully put into a situation where you have to meet people, right? Versus if you were to get like an apartment, you would just be like, you would go to school. It would be like going to UTEP almost, right? Like you would just go to school and then go home type thing, you know? Granted, that's not always how it is at UTEP. I didn't mean to make it seem like you just go to school and leave at UTEP. Like you could, at UTEP, there's a lot of opportunities for you to be involved on campus and even live on campus too. So, are any of you guys like seniors who are going to be going to college?
We're
Yeah.
all the mostly are sophomores.
Oh, okay. Oh, so you guys don't have any seniors?
No, no.
Oh, okay.
Actually have a brother. He's a he already applied to the schools. You know, he's a senior and he's gonna move, I think, to UT Austin next year.
Oh,
They actually accepted him to UCLA, but the money they gave him wasn't enough to for my
to pay
parents to be
for
able to
that.
pay. And they
Yeah.
actually also put him on the wait list for, I think it was NYU, I think it was. I'm not sure if they told him or what. He hasn't told me
Yeah.
yet, but he decided to go to
UT?
UT Austin. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's good. I think most of my friends went to UT from high school. Um, and they all had a lot of fun. And I mean, especially I think UT specifically has really nice dorm buildings. I remember when I was in high school, we had two debate tournaments at UT, and we got to stay in the dorms in UT, and they were like high class living dorms. Like they were really nice. Uh, so I think I see a question here in the chat. How important is it to attend? Okay, so David is asking, how important is it to attend an Ivy League undergraduate university in order to be competitive applicant for an Ivy League law school? So while I might not have too much insight to this, I think the most important thing is your grades. It doesn't really matter where it's from. Now, what this can help with, right, are like recommenders, right? If you get like a really good, develop a really good relationship with a professor or some other person at an Ivy League, if you can get a good letter of recommendation and, to apply to that law school, uh, I think that'll help a lot. But in terms of it, like actually like giving you a super competitive advantage, I don't think so because I mean, unless you have really good grades, but I mean, if just the fact that it's an Ivy League, I don't think it'll help that much. So I wouldn't like worry about it a lot.
Okay, so does anybody have any other questions you would like to ask? So this concludes our discussion with Jonathan. I want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to share your advice with our members. Last but not least, with your permission of Jonathan and guests, we would like to take a group picture as a screenshot of our screen.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you once again, everyone, and have a great rest of your evening. Thank you for
All right.
joining us,
Thanks,
Jonathan.
everyone.
A
Have a
good
great
one.
evening.
Thank you.